There's a fire sale happening right now with the M1 MacBook Air. So you can pick up the M1 Air with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage for $700 brand new at Walmart. Now, an even better deal is happening at Best Buy. You can get the same computer brand new for $650. So at these price points and with these specifications, is this something that you should consider picking up? Well, I'm going to pull out a bit and give you some context because the cheapest MacBook Air that Apple currently sells is the M2 MacBook Air. And with that, you're going to be spending $1,000 for 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. So on paper, at least, these look very similar, but you're getting a $300 savings by going with the M1 model. So there are a couple of caveats when considering the M2. So this M2 with the base 256 gigabytes, it has been shown that this SSD in the base model only runs half as fast as the SSD in the M1 Air. And because of that, if you ever run out of memory in these 8 gigabytes systems, once you run out of memory and hit it into swap, the M2 system, the performance is going to degrade. And you can get a lot more done on the M1 model because the SSD is twice as fast. So that's one thing to consider. Even though it says 256 on both sides, this M1 SSD is twice as fast. Second, the M2 chip is a hot chip. It's been shown in a lot of videos that once you start lighting up the CPU cores and the GPU cores, so if you're doing something really taxing on the system, and once you start ramping that chip up, the M2 chip is going to run hot. The M1 chip is a very efficient chip. When Apple designed, created, and fabricated the M1 SoC, they did a hell of a job making efficiency the primary focus of that chip. So if you're running a transcoding project, say in Handbrake, or if you're exporting a lot of videos in Final Cut or any other application, the M1 chip is going to run cooler. It doesn't feel like it's going to burn your lap. With the M2 chip, people say that when you light up everything, it feels like it's going to burn you in the lap. The M1 chip, it does get warm, but it doesn't ever get to the point where I think it's scalding to your skin. That's another consideration. That's why a lot of people really do love their M1 MacBook Air. It's a workhorse. The only thing is that this 8 gigabytes of memory. So this is how I weigh in on this. When it comes to 8 gigs of RAM in 2024, I think if you're purchasing this M1 MacBook Air as a secondary system, something where you're only going to watch YouTube on it, watch Netflix, pay your bills, do basic stuff to your taxes, web browse. I think with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and as long as you don't, go crazy with tabs, let's say like you have 40 tabs of Chrome or Firefox, as long as you kind of mine your memory and do very good memory management, you should be fine with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And I think 8 gigabytes of RAM will get you by for about 3 or 4 years, realistically. Anything beyond 2028 or even 2029 is pushing it. Anything beyond that, 8 gigabytes RAM is not going to be enough. So I think for the time being right now, this is a secondary system. This M1 MacBook Air is going to be a secondary system. If you have a workhorse, like an M1 Studio or say a MacBook Pro or a Mac Pro, if you have that for your workload, but if you want a personal computer on the side, that's where this M1 really shows its value. So, and as long as you don't expect to do too much from it, this 8 gigabyte model is going to do fine. Give it to your kids. If your kids want a computer, if they're running on Intel but they want a cheap, Apple Silicon Mac, this is the way to go. Give this to your kids. Give this to your parents. Give this to people who are not going to even think about pushing the system to its limit. And I think that's where it is. It's a good secondary computer. You can walk around the house with it. You can do whatever you need to do with it. And I think that's the real value for the M1. Skip the M2 for those reasons. Just stay with the M1, and you can use it for a couple of years, but it's that 8 gigabytes of RAM that's really going to limit you. So just keep in mind that you're not going to be stretching this thing out for 6, 7, or 8 years. Those are your expectations. All right, that's about it.